So what I'm going to talk about today is mainly farm energy audits, but I'm going to take kind of a crooked path, and I'm going to start by talking in a little more general way about energy, how farms use energy, and energy efficiency on farms, Farm Energy 101, REAP, and then more on farm energy audits, which I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about farm energy audits right now, a lot of confusion. So I'm going to begin with, this is your quiz. It's not very long. So the first question is, agricultural production on the farm accounts for what percentage of total U.S. energy consumption? So I'm giving you four choices. 1 to 3%, 15 to 18, 30 to 33, or more than 99. So anybody care to hazard a guess?
I'm going to say A.
You're going to say A, 1 to 3. Anybody disagree with that?
Yeah, I said 18.
A? Actually, that is correct. It is, and people often, I think it's much more than that. And there are many different estimates out there, and you can find a pretty wide range of estimates. Agriculture is not a particularly easy thing to define, and it blurs into many other categories. But I think it's a fairly small percentage. And the food system, which includes much more than just what farmers do, is a much bigger proportion, probably 10, maybe as high as 20% of all the energy that is used in this country. But a take-home message, and I'm going to have several take-home messages through here. I'm going to try to be a little bit controversial, by the way, and provoke you in a minute. But take-home message, making farms more efficient in their energy usage is probably not going to have a huge impact on, let's say, our nation's dependence on fossil fuels. It's going to make some impact. It's going to be important for many other reasons. But I think sometimes people tend to blame farmers. I see sort of a scapegoating thing where farmers get fingers pointed at them for using tremendous amounts of energy. They're not a big part of the national energy picture. What's the largest energy user in the U.S. food system? You got four choices again: packaging, processing, transportation, or home refrigeration and preparation. Anybody care to? Transportation. Anybody? C or B? Actually, by the report that I saw, it's actually the consumers. The people in their kitchens are using more energy to cook food and refrigerate food than any of the other categories. And again, we've heard so much about food miles lately, and it's become a real sort of an interesting phenomenon where the consumers, again, it's convenient to be able to point your finger at somebody else. But anyway, so there's some misconceptions out there. Food miles has been a real big discussion. We've heard a lot about that lately. It is important. The mode of transport is at least as important as how far it's moved. I mean, moving it on a train is much, much better than moving it on a 18-wheeler, which is much, much better than moving it on an airplane. And if you can move it on a ship, that's the best of all. So, but anyway, consumers maybe have gotten off a little easy on that debate. And then within, what's the largest energy user in agricultural production? People often forget about fertilizer, which is it's indirect energy or embodied energy. It's the energy that was used to make that synthetic fertilizer, usually from natural gas, and those natural gas inputs, which is a very large percentage. Again, just looking in aggregate at agriculture as a whole. So we don't just want to look at the direct energy consumption. We also want to look at those indirect components. Fuel is also huge. Electricity is a relatively modest target within agriculture as a whole, but very highly variable depending on what kind of a farm you're talking about. Okay, so I'm just going to go out on a limb and tell you sort of what I think, and I think there's been some maybe mixed messages about farms and energy. But this quote from Michael Pollan, I think, is something I identify with a lot. And he says that most of the problems with our food system today are related to its dependence on fossil fuels. To the extent that we can wring the oil out of the system and replace it with the energy of the sun, those policies will simultaneously improve the state of our health, our environment, and our security. So to me, those are kind of the three of the biggies. We've got health issues, obesity issues related to cheap food, related to cheap fossil fuels. We've got some national security issues related to our relationship with the oil-producing countries of the world. We've got environmental issues related to our farming practices. So it's not quite as simple as just we need to get farms to use less energy, but we need to look at the ways we use fossil fuels and energy, and we need to look for alternatives. And I think that this is not even that controversial anymore. I think we're seeing a consensus around something like this, or at least within USDA. And here's where I'm going to move into REAP. I'm going to say just a couple words about the Farm Bill. But we've seen a big growth within the Farm Bill of these energy-related programs. And I think there's a recognition that we all want to move towards a somewhat different way of using energy within agriculture and within the food system. So, and that's coming from both sides of the aisle. I don't think that's, I think that's largely becoming a kind of a consensus position. REAP is a competitive grant and loan program. It's administered by USDA Rural Development. How many of you are familiar with rural development? Okay, almost all of you, terrific. That's one of the main big agencies within USDA, not as well known as, let's say, the Forest Service or some of the others, but or NRCS, but it's a very substantial agency. This program used to be called the Section 9006 program when it was started in the 2002 Farm Bill. I don't know. Unfortunately, it ended up being Section 9007 in the 2008 Farm Bill, just to confuse us all. But a lot of people here still call it Section 9006, even though that's no longer its number in the latest Farm Bill. But it got a lot bigger in this Farm Bill. In fact, it more than doubled on an annual basis. And so now we're up to $60 million in the current fiscal year, which if you do the math, that should be probably a little over $1 million for each of the 50 states if you just could spread it around evenly. So it's a substantial project. The best website I would say to go to learn about this project is farmenergy.org, which is managed by the Environmental Law and Policy Center. This just rehashes what I just really said, that in the 2008 Farm Bill, which now has the word energy right in the title, okay, this is consensus now. This is going to be part of USDA. It's going to be about energy. There now are more numbered energy sections. There's more money in there for energy-related efforts. And then when you get beyond the energy title, there are energy programs now cropping up in many, many of the other USDA agencies. This is probably old news to most of you. But, for example, within NRCS, there's a very important program called Conservation Innovation Grant, which funds a lot of energy projects. Maybe some of you have gone to them for money. And Value-Added Producer Grant can be used to fund energy projects. So there are many other places that are Farm Bill funded. They're not necessarily in that energy title. There's a lot of funding that's moving towards this idea of changing the way we use energy in agriculture. I'm just going to say a few words about REAP. The eligible projects, so it's either energy efficiency projects or renewable energy projects can be eligible for funding. It's basically, the basic deal is a 25% cost share of total project cost. And the eligible technologies are pretty much what you would expect. Almost all the renewable energy things you could think of, as well as energy efficiency improvements. One of the things people really misunderstand about this program is they tend to think of it as a farm program. It is really not. It's a rural business program. It's in the USDA Rural Development. This is for small businesses. What is rural? It means less than 50,000 people. What's the population of Goldsboro? I don't know. Okay, every business in Goldsboro is probably eligible for this program. Every small business in Goldsboro. So all those places you drove past on your way over here, any one of them could get a 25% cost share on energy efficiency improvements. That is not widely known, and that should be much more widely known. So when you work not just on farms, but with mom and pop groceries, retail stores of all kinds, small plants, hotels, laundromats, they are all eligible for this program. Small means they meet the Small Business Administration requirements, but that has to do with how many employees you have, and I think 99% of all the businesses in America, or something close to that, are considered to meet the Small Business Administration standard. So again, almost everything in Goldsboro is eligible. There's also a loan guarantee option. That's up to 75% of your eligible project cost. And you can also get funding for feasibility studies. Great opportunity. I just put the size limits. You can get pretty big on your request. Can be up to $500,000 for renewable. Over 50,000, you do need a feasibility study. And for energy efficiency, you can request up to $2.5 million. If it's over 50,000, you need an energy audit. So this is where I'm going to segue into energy audits. I'm going to get to them. Okay, how have we been doing in our region, here in the South? Not very well. Okay? Not very well. Okay, why is this? Well, there's several things. There's been a limited access to energy audits. You need that to get a big energy efficiency project funded. There's a limited access to grant writers. And the application process is really pretty bad. It's difficult for the average farmer or business owner. They're typically going to need to work with somebody that's familiar with the program. If you go to our Directory of Energy Alternatives, if you click on your state and you see a dollar, there'll be a little $ icon. The first thing we did is we put in your state coordinator for this program. And we put their phone number in there, and their email address is right. Just go to it, click on it, and I would just get to know that person. That's the person who can help you work with farmers and get them through this process. Rural Development has done some things which I give them a lot of credit for. This year, they broke the funding into well, first of all, they set up a program to fund energy audits. So if you want to start a program in your state, there's some good money available to do that. They're up to $100,000 for a grant. Second, they're getting this money out in some of it is in a kind of a block grant form. So the state gets a block of money which it has more control over. That should help with the equity problem. And then they did set aside 20% of the funds for small projects, which is another good step. What is happening in Iowa, and we did talk to a lot of people in Iowa. We have an office in Iowa. I think these are the things that I heard. Utilities are very involved in a very good way, and it's Alliant Energy and Mid-American are the two big investor-owned utilities. Alliant, at least, has an audit staff. They go out to the farm and they do the audits. And they work with grant writers. When you go to the USDA Rural Development website in Iowa, there's a list of grant writers for this project. The utility people know the grant writers. So it gets quite easy for the farm. They set up an audit with their utility. The utility passes the information directly to the grant writer. The grant writer starts working on the proposal. Alliant Energy's success rate in this program is pretty good. It's been 97%. They've done almost 200 of these proposals in the last 2-3 years. their Office of Rural Development is very aggressive. Frankly, some of it's a little mixed out there. Some of the state coordinators are not nearly as aggressive or perhaps interested. But from their website, you can find templates, you can find lists of auditors, grant writers, and they go out and do workshops. They really do help people. Here in North Carolina, we've got some very good people that are doing, I think, an excellent job, and they're getting on board with this program. State organizations in Iowa are really focused on this. They're aware of it. They're helping people get into it. I mean, the mainstream commodity groups. And they've really consciously targeted cookie-cutter type projects. Grain dryers are big in Iowa. Some people in Iowa jokingly call this what do they call it, the new grain dryer program or something like that, because an awful lot of farmers in Iowa have improved their grain dryers, and once you've written one grain dryer proposal, the next one's not going to be all that different. So the grant writer that's now an expert on writing a grain dryer proposal can pretty much knows how to do that, and that's why they've got that 97% success rate. That's more like what you need to work towards in our states. Okay, I'm going to shift to energy audits, and I'm going to talk very quickly about this big 70-page report that we just wrote. What did we do last couple of years? We looked at, and we did this. Why did we do this? Because there have been so many confusions about energy audits, and because energy audits appear to be one of the barriers that's been keeping people out of this program. We get a lot of calls, where do I get an energy audit? How do I get an energy audit? What is an energy audit? You know, I have to do this to get into this program. There's nobody around here that even knows what this is about. So we wanted to really try to get to the bottom of that, and we looked at published data where it's available from utilities and programs that do these audits. And NCAT's done hundreds of energy audits. We have 12 energy engineers. That's just about all they do is energy audits. But they do them on industrial facilities, every kind of commercial facility, residential facility. Sometimes they go out and do farms. But so we have a lot of our own knowledge and experience with this. For 3 years we ran, and I was managing an irrigation efficiency program in Montana where we did energy audits. We did hundreds of energy audits. We interviewed providers, about 20 of them. We interviewed about 100 producers. I think about 12 of those we did intensive, like 1-hour interviews with them. They were kind of from around the country, and a variety of other more grassroots type organizations. We did, as I mentioned, another study of these do-it-yourself tools, and I'm not going to say much about that, but they are promising, and they're very helpful to producers. Really like them, I guess I would say. And this project was all funded by USDA Risk Management Agency. Okay, what is an energy audit? This is it's hazy because it's a made-up term. This was coined in the 70s, and it confuses a lot of people. The intent was good. It's supposed to remind you of a financial audit, and it's about saving money, and it's so. But part of what it does is it reminds people of the IRS, and it sort of has this negative thing. And part of what it does is it intimidates people because it seems like it's some exotic technical thing. Whereas all it really is a study of your energy usage conducted for the purpose of saving energy and money. When you get your bills out of the drawer and you try to figure out how you're spending your money on energy, you're doing an energy audit. It's a pretty rudimentary one. But it's an energy study. That's really all it is. And that idea of an audit is, you're going through looking for savings in places where you're wasting money. You describe the baseline energy usage, and then you describe measures, possible measures. This gets a little engineer jargon, but measures that could reduce energy consumption or cost. And you're looking for low-hanging fruit. You're looking for things that are cost-effective, they're inexpensive, and they have a very short payback. That's the gist of it. You describe the measures, you try to put a price tag on them, and you try to put a payback period on them. So now I'm going to just give you 12 points that I think every extension person should know about farm energy audits. But it was quite different from auditing a home. When people hear about energy audits, they're more familiar with calling the utility to have them come to your house, and those are also energy audits. You know, they do the blower door test and they do all that. Three differences that stand out to me. One, farms are a lot more variable and diverse than houses. In a house, usually it's about comfort and cost, and it's a few simple systems, the heating, cooling, some water heating. Farms, you get into a lot wider variety of things. They're more holistic in their use of energy. By that I mean, when you change one part of it, it's going to affect some other part of the operation. So you really have to have a sense for how the whole system works to know, even to visualize some of the best things you could do on that farm. It's not always as easy as just plugging in a new piece of equipment. Third thing that's quite important is that farms are businesses. They're not just, farms are, understandably, less willing to just gamble on some new idea that somebody comes up with. If it's your livelihood, you want to make sure that all the animals aren't going to die, or something else isn't going to go wrong because somebody came in and told you they had a great new idea for you to save energy. This becomes an issue because farms have a reputation for being sort of conservative in their energy practices and in embracing change. And I think there's some truth in that. I think there's some good reasons for that. And partly it goes back to, why would you gamble? Yeah, you can save X $100 a year, but if something really goes bad, this is your business. This is your livelihood we're talking about. How do we do a farm energy audit? Really, it's not that, conceptually, it's not that hard. You group energy uses into categories, like lighting, fans, water heating, space heating, pumps, refrigeration. Kind of just make yourself a spreadsheet or put it on a piece of paper. You list you start with probably with the category you think is likely to use the most energy on that farm. And how would you know that? Probably by looking at energy bills. The first thing you do is you get the bills out of the drawer and you see where the energy, try to get some idea where the energy is going. This is what an engineer does, but it's also what you could do or what a farmer could do. List equipment. You want to list out the size of that equipment. How much current does it draw? How much fuel does it use? And then what you're doing is you're looking for the low-hanging fruit, low-cost measures that are likely to produce significant energy savings. How do you know what those are? Well, I'm sorry, but there's really no substitute for having some professional training. So an engineer is going to know probably more than you or I'm not an engineer, are going to know about this. They're better at thinking about this. But that's what you have to do, is recognize for these kinds of equipment what are the low-cost measures that will make them more efficient. Then you move on to the more complicated or risky measures that have longer paybacks. Who does farm energy audits? Historically, they've been mainly provided by utilities, and particularly in states that have these systems benefit programs. Unfortunately, and John can probably correct me, I think most southern states, relatively few southern states, have these public benefit programs or system benefit type programs. What those are, they charge all the customers, usually an electric utility, a small charge on their power bill, pool the money and use it to fund energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. So the utilities run these in, I think, 20 or 25 states. Unfortunately, in the South, I think it's relatively uncommon. We're trying to get that here in North Carolina. Very few utilities have audit staff. They usually contract it out. So there are thousands of energy assessment companies and services nationally. Very, very few of them specialize in agriculture. That's beginning to change because of the REAP program. NSAVE is in Vermont. They're by far the biggest that does these in, I think, 24. They've done them in 24 states or so. GDS Associates, which is a national engineering consulting firm, is also quite large. Typically, the way they do it is they send data gatherers out to the farm. It's too expensive to put an engineer in a truck and say, go drive to this farm in the, hundreds of miles away. So what they'll do is they'll send out a data gatherer to go out and look at the farm, take pictures, and get the basic measurements, send it back to the engineer. Recently, a lot of state organizations have begun setting up their own programs. This is new. Here in North Carolina, it's the Farm Bureau. It got tobacco settlement money, and they're doing energy audits. Kentucky has a program, new program. State ag department is involved in. Several states are now setting up their own audit programs for farms. What do they cost? Variable. Again, you're just paying for skilled labor pretty much, so it depends how complicated it is. The basic pump test for irrigation could be as little as a few $100s. Typical price tag for a REAP audit is going to be $1,000. I think NCAT charges like $1,250 or 1% of total project cost, whichever is probably higher. So usually you're not going to get it done for much less than $1,000, I would say. And then if it's a big farm, a big business, it could be tens of thousands of dollars. Again, depending on how in-depth and how complicated. Qualifications, within REAP, it has to be a professional engineer or a certified energy manager. Outside of REAP, it's a little more nebulous. There are many training programs for auditors. Almost none of them are specific to farms. So there is a new standard that the ASABE has just come out with this summer for what a basic farm audit should do. But until recently, there wasn't really a lot of clear guidance there. The PE has to conduct the audit. This is tricky, but with NSAVE, their engineers are all in Vermont. So they're conducting it, but they're nowhere near the farm, okay? Keep that in mind because that's a cost issue. Availability remains poor in most states. I guess that goes without saying. We found 27 states that either had or had recently had some type of farm audit program that appeared to be suitable for the REAP program, but in most states, those were only in a few counties or they were no longer fully functional. Most states, quite honestly, contract with one of the larger companies. NSAVE, again, is by far the biggest. And what that means is that in-state, they probably have very little capacity of their own. They may have a program, but they may just be contracting it out. So where we want to move with this is that in your state, you would have the capacity of doing these things. This is important. Utility folks that we talk to a lot of them, they're not always that enthusiastic about working with agriculture. They tend to see it as a difficult customer class. And this one quote, this is very blunt, but I thought it sort of got right to the point. One of the auditors we talked to, he said, expense is the barrier. What does it mean to you as an energy professional to work on farms? And he said the energy savings are generally meager. It doesn't make sense to bother with it. So if you audit industrial facilities and you go in there and there's big machinery, big energy consumption, big savings to be had, that's a good use of your time if you're a good engineer. To get in a truck and drive out to a farm where there's less energy being used, to him, he said there's not much energy there, it's hard to get to. There's a tremendous diversity in the operations, they're all first ones. Okay? So just be aware that utilities, there's some frustration from a utility perspective. They see this, they're serious about saving energy. They see farms as a difficult place to do that. And then you make the recommendation, and then the farms are often conservative and slow to go make those recommended changes. I would say at present the demand for farm energy audits is mainly driven by REAP. We talked to an awful lot of farmers. We found very few who were willing to pay anything like the cost of a professional energy audit. Granted, this is very limited, but in Montana we surveyed 24. We found only 3 willing to pay more than $300. out of 24. Well, the true cost is about 12, let's say 1,200 or more. Okay, so we're not even in the ballpark. Except for, now larger farms, it's a different story. Some of them will do this. But the simple thing I want you to have in your mind is that this is mostly driven by the need to get into this program. Okay? And then I had a couple quotes from California where utility folks just said, you know, for our ag customers, energy efficiency is really not a big deal to them. It's a minor cost in a big farming, California farming operation, and they've got a lot of other things to worry about. So I think this is something to keep in mind if your assumption is that farms are desperately looking for help and they're eager to have an energy audit done. It's really not quite that way. Okay, do energy audits save money? I'm giving you a lot of sort of bad news here, I guess, but the reputation is not good. If you just do an energy audit, and this is true for residential, it's true for commercial, it's true for anything, unless it's connected to an incentive and there's a system in place to assist you in making that change, a lot of energy audits don't lead to any actual project being implemented. So strictly from the standpoint of saving energy, energy audits are expensive and they're not particularly effective in and of themselves. They need to be connected to part of an integrated effort. Again, a couple of blunt quotes. The second one was somebody who just sort of surprised me. She said, we used to do farm energy audits, but we finally came to our senses and put a stop to it. We had a box, when I came here, we had a box of audit reports that were completely worthless. They resulted in hardly any measures being implemented at all. This was an agricultural energy efficiency program representative. So you need them to get into REAP. They are of value, but they have a particular place. So REAP is first and foremost a business development program. This is also a misunderstanding people have. If you look at the point scoring, and I'm almost done here, the actual energy saved in an energy efficiency proposal is 15 out of 130 points. Okay, it's really not about how much energy you save. It's a business, it's a rural development program. They want to see that you have done your homework, the project is going to get built, it's going to save some energy, but they're not weighting it very heavily towards how much energy you save. Within REAP, the audit, the role of it is it's part of your burden of proof. It's not something that USDA Rural Development thinks they're doing you a favor by, they're doing it as, we don't want to waste federal money, prove to us that this is a good project, okay? For utilities, it's very different. Utilities pay for audits as a service to their customers. NRCS has funded some audits, and they do it because they think it helps people save water and save natural resources. Just quick, this is the last point, misconceptions. You don't need a professional energy audit unless the project is $50,000 or more. So smaller energy efficiency projects, you don't need that professional energy audit. You need an energy assessment, which is less rigorous. But the engineer doesn't have to visit the farm. That's a key point to keep in mind. The audit doesn't have to be a whole farm energy study. It can be focused on the component that you're thinking about changing. And then keep in mind, this is not limited to agriculture. That's the thing that nobody knows, but now you do. We also looked at successful energy efficiency programs in rural areas, and I think 4 or 5 points, or maybe just 3. They do it over a period of years. They build a reputation over time. They understand how rural people learn, including word of mouth and trust relationships, very important. So here's where you come in. Extension is trusted to a large degree in many rural parts of America. Extension is a missing piece of the puzzle. when the programs at work, because rural people and agricultural people often trust equipment dealers and installers, integrators, they trust maybe their commodity farm organizations. If you can get those groups involved and you can get extension involved, now we got something that's a powerful, integrated approach that really could save some serious energy in rural America. And there is tons of energy to be saved out there. You folks are in an ideal position to really help with that. And I'm excited about that. Two other things. Rebates, prescriptive incentives are great. They're inexpensive to administer. I compare trying to save energy through energy audits is kind of like trying to promote public health by sending doctors out to do house calls. It's like the most expensive thing you could do. Yes, you're going to get a very high-quality service, but you're not going to want to pay the price tag. So there's a lot of inexpensive things that can be done that will save a lot of energy. Bob's going to talk about that in a minute here. You don't need to do a big fancy report. That's expensive, and farms don't necessarily need that. Okay, I think you got your take-home messages. There you go. It's like doctors doing house calls. So energy audits, I would encourage you to think about it as it's related to REAP. It's related to getting people into that program. And when you think about really saving energy for people, broaden your mind and look at a range of other things you can do. Get those equipment dealers and installers involved and show your face as an extension agent, and I think you can have a huge impact.